Hello and welcome to Optional Rule. My name is Scott. I'm the host of this occasional D&D live stream chat, world building, talk about rules, all things related to tabletop role-playing games of all kinds. So this is a chill moment. I'm going to do a little hangout tonight as I talk through myself, maybe, and I hope you'll join me in the conversation around rules to help make movement and maneuvering in theater of the mind and other parts of D&D a little bit more interesting, or at least provide some options that engage players, encourage them to maneuver more and do a few things like that. So I hope you'll give the channel a follow, like, subscribe, all the social media things. It always helps me out. I'm a very small streamer, very small content creator. You can follow me on Twitch at Optional Rule. You can follow me on Twitter, where I'm most active as Optional Rule. I also run a blog at optionalrule.com. And yeah, so that's it. I'm not really selling anything. I'm here to just talk with people about D&D, shared hobby, a hobby I love, and I hope you'll love it as well. So that's what I'm doing. I wish there was a way to just increase the font size without increasing this OneNote top. So obviously you can see I'm using OneNote here. It's become my editor of choice now that I'm fully in Microsoft 365. I had been using Notion, but when that got large, it really got slowed down for me. So I've kind of gone out and started to do a little bit more with OneNote again, since the online version is kind of consistent, or at least consistently inconsistent, right? It changes at the same time. And so that's where I'm at. All right. So what am I looking to do tonight? So what I'm looking to do tonight is I love the idea of a dynamic and ever-changing battlefield, right? Something that leans into the sort of the action-based nature of a fight in D&D, but I don't. Right now, I think in most of our minds that is tied to the battle map. Like if it's either a battle map with lots of tactical movement, or it's not, in which case it's kind of loosey goosey and doesn't do much. And I think there's a happy middle ground. I think that you can not only can you create a little bit more excitement with maneuver in theater of the mind, but you can actually break away from some of the limitations that you have with a battle map. Those being specifically that I think on a battle map, your players are bounded by the edges of the map and what's on it. Like the minute you put a battle map out there, the players don't think a whole lot about the terrain. They don't think a lot about the world around them. Their view automatically zooms in to the drawn out area. And if you've drawn it out with Sharpies on a battle map, there can be very, very limited number of things there. I might be overmodulating a little bit. Apologize. I can never get my volume quite right, so hopefully it's not too bad right now. But so that's one big limitation. The other is that the nature of turns on a battle map is very like, okay, I go and I move fully and I do all my actions and everything is bounded. Like on the one whole player, it's like time stops. That person moves, does all their things. Then the next person goes, and sort of round robins like that. And you can break that cycle a little bit if you don't try to model that exact same limitation in theater of the mind. So that's what I'm going to try to do here. A rule that obviously we still have turns, we still have things like that, but there's some option to work together. There's some options I think that if you break down the assumptions of maneuvering in a tactical battle map, it opens up other possibilities. And that's what I'm going to focus on today. So what do I want out of it? I always do these in my little design documents, right? It's overview. These are some rules for movement, positioning, and maneuvering in theater of the mind combat for 5th edition D&D. Short and sweet. Principles. So I have some design principles that as I'm trying to look at what I'm doing here, I'm always vetting against these design principles. I find this technique super useful for me. I suggest it to you. You do it as well. I went ahead and I wrote a small tweet about this earlier that you should use summarization and bulleting as a way not just to express things to players, but to check yourself as a DM or a game designer to make sure you know what you're doing, right? Are you consistent with your own? Are you hitting your own goals? Are you explaining it simply enough to yourself? A lot of times when people write house rules, one of the big downfalls is they kind of understand it in their mind, but they think they understand it, but when they go to explain it, things kind of break down, right? They can't get it across, and they don't realize it's actually a little bit more fuzzy than they might realize. So what I want to do by go ahead and writing this down is just give it a little bit of shape. So what am I trying to accomplish here? So what I'm trying to accomplish specifically is I want these rules, they should be a fun part of play and not just a new rule. In other words, I don't want players to feel like, oh my God, it's this added thing I have to track. I want them to feel like, oh, I have the opportunity to do these new things. That's what I want. I want to provide some interesting variability in combat without invalidating action. So I don't want this to come out that overrides feats and things like that. One of the downsides of theater of the mind combat in D&D is that there are certain classes that are really heavily built around movement. A couple of feats specifically, like the Sentry feat, reach weapons, different things like that, that really assume you're fighting on a tactical battle map. And if you're not, you're kind of undercutting those players that have those feats. So that's a problem. Reach weapons are very similar. Opportunity attacks are another example of that. So those are all really sort of, you don't want to invalidate that style of play. So you want something that honors that. And it should provide some meta level of tactical gameplay. In other words, people are trying to accomplish something. They're trying to manage the battlefield. One of the advantages of something like a battle mat is that players feel like they're managing the battlefield to an extent. When you get rid of the battlefield, the battlefield, go entirely theater of the mind, sometimes people feel like they lose that. So this is an attempt to sort of undo that. It should not put an undue burden on the player. So I'll get to this in a second when I talk about what these rules are. But I've used this now in 3 or 4 sessions without telling the players that we had additional rules. It's worked really well for me in that way because I've just asked them, well, what do you want to do? What are you trying to accomplish? And I can use one of these guiding principles as a way to sort of give them an option. And a great option in combat is to give them a reward, but tell them what the risk is up front and let them know if they want to risk it. So if they want to leap over a table and try to roll up behind an opponent for an advantage on an attack, tell them, yeah, that'll be a DC 15 acrobatics check. But if you fail the check, and if you succeed, you'll get behind him and you'll get your advantage. It'll be a surprise. But if you fail, you won't leap over the table. You might fall down prone, or maybe I'll give them some other stake, like they're unable to get the attack in and they lose their attack for the round. Losing an action for a round is a pretty big deal. I wouldn't recommend that, but it's something that gives a player something to weigh. Like, do I want this advantage? And do I want to risk something in order to get it? Everything in D&D should be some sort of managed risk, right? That's the game at its core. Do I want to fight this monster? Do I want to take these hit points? Do I want to deal this damage? It's all a weighed risk, and these rules should do that as well. And then I want it to flow naturally with a narrative description of actions in theater of the mind. In other words, I don't want to recreate tactical movement if we're not using a map. So I'm just going to try to get away from that and make it something hopefully useful and exciting. All right. So what is the principle here? So let me write in the principle. So the basic principle, I put down the principles, but the summary, like in short, give that little section in short, players, when two opponents, so we'll call them opponents, that want the same thing from movement, just let it happen. If opponents don't want the same thing, roll it out. When in doubt, roll it out. Call for a skill roll. It's that simple. I would say it's that simple. So a lot of times in combat, you don't need to use this all the time. And again, this is not opponents. I can't spell worth pops. Opponents. APPONE. There we go. So the idea is in theater of the mind, if you have two people that want to close with each other and they want to get into a fight, there's nothing you need to do. It works very well. They're just going to run right at each other and they're going to start fighting. But there's a lot of times where it wants to become more dynamic. You want, like, one opponent wants to engage one foe, but wants to avoid other foes. You might have an archer that doesn't want people to close with them and they want to kite them and stay as far away as possible. You might have someone who wants to stay behind cover. And here you get into outcomes where different opponents want different outcomes. And what's been done in theater of the mind before is that DM just either says it happens or doesn't happen, which is okay. Nothing wrong with that. It speeds things along, certainly, but you end up with either a less sense of dynamic behavior on the battlefield, or it's kind of DM fiat, which if they rule against you, it feels a little weird, right? If they root for you all the time, then it feels a little Monty Hawley, right? It gives a little like you want to work for it, you want to earn something. Most players, despite all this conversation online about how you should always say yes to the players, which is one of the worst pieces of advice out there. Matter of fact, D&D mostly describes how you get to yes, right? Get it how you should always tell the player how do you get to yes, but you don't necessarily need to say yes to everything automatically. Ask them to work for it. Ask them to come up with an idea. Ask them to perform a skill roll. These are all at the core of D&D, and these rules sort of lean into that a little bit. All right, so in short, what you just have is if two opponents are maneuvering and they want different things, then you just call for some kind of roll. So what kind of skills are we talking about here? The player names their actions, ties it to a specific skill. I suggest the three most important skills, and don't get closed-minded about this. I recommend athletics, acrobatics, and deception and insight are two ones that are vastly overlooked in an encounter in the battlefield. Athletics and acrobatics, I think, make sense to people. You're either like running really quickly towards someone, or powering, shouldering them out of the way, or running up to them, or grabbing them. Acrobatics, you're flipping over people and tables, and you're rolling and tumbling. But deception is you're feinting, right? You're moving one way or another, trying to fake out your opponents. Insight is to try to read where your opponent is going to go. I think those are underappreciated skills that you can use in combat. This provides, I think, good ways to use that, to do that. It leans in, obviously, to fighter types, rogue types, and maybe paladin, maybe clerics and so forth, but these are not strong skills typically for like wizards and sorcerers and things like that. Maybe warlocks, but not as much. And it sort of makes sense. But if they choose those skills, then they're welcome to go for it as well. I did say here something that I call out is if you're calling for a skill check, allow a player to come up with a suggestion of something, why something might be relevant. And that's not usually used. So let's say they're using these acrobatics, athletics, deception, or whatever, and they decide, hey, I'm a ranger. This is my favorite terrain. I'm in a jungle. Jungle is my favorite terrain. Can I use my knowledge nature to know how vines grab people's when they try to move through them, or swing on the vines, or something like that? That would be, or survival, to know how my muddy ground, how to move around on muddy ground, or any number of other things. Or I think I gave an example in my paragraph of letting the wizard know something. If they're an architect of an ancient civilization and they have knowledge history, maybe they can use their knowledge history to know how doorways are shaped, or how they can stand with advantage in the architecture. Really, the idea here isn't to say no automatically or yes automatically. The idea is to actually put the burden on the player to come up with how the skill is relevant, to think about their character, to justify the action, and to ask for the role. So, like a premise I use all the time is the player names the action, the DM calls for the role, and the dice decide the outcome. Again, that's kind of we've lost sight of that, but that's kind of the core of D&D to me, and that's what this is. So, what I've said before is kind of what I mean by this maneuvers. When you have it's their turn to go. They say, I want to engage an opponent. If DMs can say everybody's either super long range, so you can get to them basically in one move. They're or they're outside that range, or you're already engaged with them. That's really all you need out of it. You don't need to worry about specifically where everybody is in a 5-foot square on the battlefield. Instead, you just worry about who's fighting who wants to avoid who wants to block who wants to try to get cover. What you need to worry about is their maneuver. So this is what I like about it. Maps focus on your position on the battlefield. Theater of the Mind focuses on intention. And we've seen Theater of the Mind really take off in the last 2 years, especially with the pandemic. If you look at the amount of online play that is out there is increasingly moving to Theater of the Mind. If you look at all of the live streams from D&D, I'm not sure if I can think of an official live stream for D&D that uses battle maps. I mean, I know Critical Role uses a live map, which is okay, but I certainly don't have the wherewithal to put out those miniatures and have a camera on my table and all that stuff. And I think for most of it, that's out of our reach. So instead, they use Theater of the Mind. They describe the scene. People say how they're trying to maneuver through it, what the outcome they're looking to have, instead of that 5-foot grid of positioning. So again, if two opponents agree on what they want, let it happen. If somebody wants something else out of that, in other words, they don't want to be engaged by somebody, or they want to disengage with somebody, or they want to flee, or they want to use cover, or they want to intercept another fighter, they can call for a skill challenge. So the easiest thing to do is these maneuvers. So you can engage, avoid, disengage, flee, use cover, intercept. There's a couple of reactions here. I'll get to that in a second. Once you've broken out of this mindset of only one person is moving in space and time at a moment, that you can actually begin to coordinate actions a little bit. So you can use reactions to do things like flanking, helping one another, intercept somebody to protect the mage or the cleric. Those are reactions you can use. And there's special notes around things like dodge action, the sentry feat, or other things that stop movement. So engage. That's just a simple thing. I want the players. It's your turn. You say I want to move over and engage that orc number 2. If the orc does not want to, they would take the avoid. They would say, well, I'm avoiding it. And you would both roll appropriate skills. You would roll whatever, let's say athletics versus the orc's athletic skill. The one who wins gets the outcome that they're looking for. Now, this is something that's used predominantly in a game called Burning Wheel from back in the early aughts. But I've seen it used in several other games before. What you don't want to do is just have an all or nothing outcome, right? So I say what happens is, let's say the human wants to engage the orc. The orc evades and avoids them because they're fighting somebody else, or maybe they're a bowman and they want to keep out of range. You let the attack happen, but it's a -2 if the person trying to avoid wins. If the person trying to engage them wins, they can go ahead and attack as normal, and then they're engaged. It stays engaged. So that's an action that on the battlefield, like an archer can try to avoid. The other thing often you do is two opponents engage each other. They start fighting. A third opponent tries to come in. They don't want to have that second opponent to fight. So they avoid that person. So the deal is, so at the top, you can attempt any of these maneuvers freely using one of your named actions. Not named skills, named skills. Skills. If you've previously engaged or avoided somebody, you're at disadvantage on your roll. So let's say player A attacks Orc 1. They both agree to engage. There's no roll necessary. They just go ahead and fight. Then player 2, decides that they're going to get into this fight and engage that orc as well. The orc wants to avoid that player, so he wants to hopefully get a +2 to his AC or -2 to their attack, and tries to avoid. But because he's already engaged, he's basically kind of already declared himself somewhere in the battlefield. Makes him easier to get. That person is at disadvantage. Doesn't have to be he. The orc is at disadvantage on their roll. It's that simple. That's really not that hard. Similarly, disengage. When does that? So engaging is basically moving up to melee range with an opponent to attack an opponent. Avoid is trying to stay out of reach for an opponent. If you win and engage, so winning this means, winning means you can attack them freely. Anyone engaged freely. Anyone engaged freely. You have engaged freely. Avoiding. Try to avoid, stay out of reach of an opponent. Winning this means you have a +2 to your AC. Now, this might stack with other things. The stacking is not a big thing in 5th edition, but you don't want to get too, it's not really a cover bonus. It's not something like that, although you'll have to reason it out. Either you're unable to get to them because they're keeping the opponent they're currently fighting between you and them. They're just outrunning you. They're whatever. Don't get too specific about it. Just use whatever description makes sense for the moment. That's kind of the point here. And if anybody has anything they want to add or questions they want to ask or things that they want to kibitz about or even something not related to this, please go ahead and drop it in the chat. I'm happy to talk about that. But we'll just continue along with that until then. All right, disengage. What is disengage? So disengaging is you want to get out of fighting altogether. You can't. You can only engage. You can only make a melee attack to somebody you have engaged. You already have engaged. So hold on. You want to get out of being. You want to remove the engagement with an opponent. Because once you're engaged, you're engaged. You can't just not be engaged the next turn, right? You can choose to avoid them if you want, or you can choose to disengage, in which case you're out of you're out of combat range. You can't attack them back. What do you get if you win this? Yeah, if you win, you are successfully. You are no longer engaged by that or opponent or all opponents. No longer engaged by that opponent. I'm giving a impression that it's like one person. It really isn't. If you're engaged by 3 people, I don't know how to describe this, but I'm gonna have to think about it. The idea is if, let's say you're engaged with 3 opponents and you want to try to get the heck out of Dodge, right? You can you roll disengage, and they roll theirs, and they you basically you win. If you win, everybody you've beat in that you've disengaged from. If you beat everybody, you're successfully completely disengaged. If you lose against some of them, you're still engaged with some of them. Let me see. If you've previously engaged, avoided someone. Have to change the skill above. So if you're engaged, I have to see. I have to think about that. So I want you to have disadvantage on avoiding someone if you have already engaged somebody, and I want you to have disadvantage on engaging a new opponent if you've already tried to engage somebody, because you can try to engage multiple people at a time, like keep them at arm's length on either side. What that does for you is allows you to take reactions against them, right? So there's some utility in doing that in theater of mind and explicitly calling it out, like knowing. Getting into that, like, am I within 5 feet of so-and-so? And the game master doesn't know. This gets it down to, I don't know, did you engage them? Did you try to keep them within 5 feet? And if the answer is yes, and I rolled well and I was able to engage them, then that settles it for you. You're able to do that quickly. So disengage, I'm actually not sure what the utility is. I might need to strike that. Now I'm thinking about it. All right, flee would be you're taking a full maneuver, trying to leave combat, and trying to flee combat. What do you get if you? This is another one I might need to strike. What do you get if you win versus not? I mean, this you can get into. I'm wondering if I should throw back in opportunity attacks, because there's no need for opportunity attacks once this is in, right? They're kind of redundant. Opportunity attacks were built into the game to sort of prevent players from just moving anywhere in the battlefield. And this is an alternate method of doing that. It determines whether they can, right? It's intention, skill, and outcome. And you don't need opportunity attacks with this. But I'm wondering, like, what's the purpose of flee? I put it down here because it sounded like an option you can do, but now this is the whole point of bulletizing this, right? Is there some utility of having this in the game? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so all right. What flee does is it moves you out to long range. It moves you out of like a movement range. In other words, you're more than one full movement away. Moves you out to long range, i.e., you're more than one movement away. So you have archers. Maybe they've been engaged. Maybe they So they want to get away from somebody, so they can take that entire action to this is the equivalent of like a full move action. They want to get out of melee range with somebody and just be out of the action. They'll take a full move to get to the side of the field. If they're fleeing, I mean, normally you would just let that happen as a DM. You might have this if they're engaged with somebody and they want to flee. But what's the difference between disengage and flee? Disengage just breaks an engagement with somebody, right? I'll leave it. I'll leave them in. I don't know if they're necessary, but these are just guidelines for what I want to do. So yeah, disengage is just if you want to stay in the middle of combat, so you don't want to leave it, but you just want to be out of engagement with somebody. I think it's fair enough. You might want to do something like, use a thrown weapon, use a spell. That might be a great reason to do it. Lots of things like that might be a reason why you want to do it. Flee would be like running a full movement, gets you out to long range. You're more than a movement away. Takes a full action. What else can you do here if you flee? If somebody doesn't want you to flee, so we assume you're engaged already. You're just going to take a full action to move away. If you lose this, you don't get that ability to get away, right? You winning means you are more than a full movement away from combat. But losing means you're not, right? So so people can still continue to attack you. In other words, the battle has sort of gone with you to this place. So are you at disadvantage for being engaged? I don't know. I'll worry about that later. Using cover, that's another one that comes in a lot. I remember I had a Theater of the Mind combat. I was running Icewind Dale running with Frost Maiden. I ran a Theater of the Mind combat around a wagon. It was like the players had noticed this. It was a shared Dinaval adventure, if I remember correctly. Anyway, the players were up in a tavern, kind of watching this keep that the bad guys were holed up in. And in the middle of the night, some people come out of the keep with this wagon. They push through the snow, and they're trying to get out in the middle of the night, smuggling something the players don't know what it is. So the players go down, intercept the wagon. A fight breaks out. The knights, the sort of escort that were on either side of the wagon, blocked the players from getting around to attack the priest who's in the back casting spells. The priest is trying to maintain cover behind the wagon. So, and the players, of course, they had a lot of ranged weapons. So we ended up in this weird shootout, and the players were trying to circle around the outside to get around the cover that the priest had, because he was right up against the wagon. So instead of just saying, they don't get it, they aren't able to overcome cover, or they are able to overcome it, I just had them do a opposed movement check, and the priest happened to win, so they maintained their cover. So that's how the whole thing went. And it was one of those situations where the priests were like popping up, casting their spell, and popping back down, so they were in full cover. And as the players tried to get around them, the priest was going like around the other side of the wagon. So this is what do you get? So this is ability to maintain the kind of cover. Now this might seem complex, but I want to point out, so because this came up before, the reason why I think this sounds more complex than it is in actual use. You don't really perseverate. You don't really wring your hands over a lot of these things. You just have a player say, you're in the middle of this combat. The priest is popping up, pointing his finger, casting spells. Another player is out in the open with their bow, firing at them. And they say, hey, I want to see if I can circle around and get a clear shot at them. And you say, well, okay, you roll athletics. They roll athletics, opposed athletics checks. If you win, you get a clean shot. If they win, they maintain their cover. That's it. That's as simple as it gets. I think for a couple rounds, and I think I gave that priest advantage because they were the player has to run around in this big circle because they're like 30 feet away, and all the priest has to do is like move 3 feet over to maintain. So I gave them advantage. And it worked pretty well. It was pretty, they had the players trying to do things like climb up buildings to get a shot down. Once two players are doing it, that's basically the equivalent of disadvantage, right? Or at least the players having advantage because multiple of them are rolling. So yeah, they have. So it's ability, if you win, you maintain your cover. All right. Intercept. This is blocking somebody else from moving. And actually, I think I'm going to put that in reactions, which I have down here. Yeah, I'm going to put intercept in. So there's a couple of things that I'm calling reactions that can happen. This is something where I think this system really begins to shine. Again, you get out of this idea of only one player is moving in space and time and letting other people do things. So there's a couple of options that you get to have that other people may not. So let's say let's start with flanking. So flanking, someone's going to engage somebody. Another player can burn their reaction, say, I want to flank them too. So you're both able to coordinate your movement. So you both roll. If you both beat the person, they're flanked. And you both get advantage. So the person attacking now and you can attack later since they'll be engaged, right? And you burned your reaction, so you can't use your reaction again. The other outcome is that only one of you wins. So you still end up in a situation where you're either both or one of you will have full engagement, and the other one or both of you will have a -2 to your attacks. The person has a +2 to their AC. So just you're able to really get on either side of them. They're kind of ducking you, but not all together. But they're still engaged. Or you've both, like I said, you both lost and you both get -2 to your attack. So I think that's a fairly easy thing to do, and it's a good way to coordinate because you can't really effectively coordinate. One of the big downsides of flanking in D&D on a tactical map is the first person moves up, do their attack normally, and it just goes that way. The second person moves up, they get the flanking bonus, but they couldn't. It's weird because they would have both moved up at the same time. Why didn't they both get the flanking bonus? So this is a way to do that. You can also help. So if the defender loses, what is this, right? You attempt to get on either side of an opponent and coordinate attacks. If both flankers win, they have advantage on attacks. Otherwise, it works like normal engagement. There we go. And to get out of flanking, you're just trying to disengage with both, right? You're trying to disengage or avoid both. All right, engagement. Oh, helping. Helping is, I can't really think of it. That's an action, right? I'm not sure I need helping here. Maybe that goes down. So let's go down to intercept. I'll take helping out for a second. I'll go down to intercept. Intercept means you want to stop somebody's movement. In other words, you want to get in front of them and you want to completely stop them from moving towards an opponent. I was on the fence about this. Like, should that be an action? Should that be something else? I'm not sure what intercept should be. So basically you attempt, I'll leave this in for now, from engaging another opponent. Well, it's another combatant, right? You win. They are with you unable to engage original combatant. Yeah. All right. So basically you're forcing them to attack you, or at least be engaged with you. You can attack and engage multiple people. All right. That's what that is. So special notes, dodge action. What does that do for you? This gives you advantage on all move maneuvers maneuvers and reactions to avoid being engaged. All right, that's what that does. Sentry feat. All right, sentry feat. Let's look up in D&D Beyond what sentry feat is. Make sure I got it right. No, where's my feat? Is it Vigilant Guardian? Where's my feats? All right, let me see. Game rules, feats. Sentinel. There we go. Take advantage of... You hit an opponent with an opportunity attack. The creature's speed becomes 0. Yeah, this is a rough one because I'm kind of removing opportunity attacks, right? So if I wanted to put them back in, if I have a principle here of not I have a principle here of not trying to invalidate other actions. So I got to come up with something against it. A creature, so the abilities you get, when you hit an opponent with an opportunity attack, creature speed becomes 0. Creatures provoke opportunity attacks from you even when they take the disengage action. When a creature within 5 feet of you makes an attack against a target other than you, you can use your reaction to make a melee weapon attack against a creature. So all I have to worry about is this opportunity attack and 0 feet of movement. So I need to add some option back into that. So sentry feat. All right, with disengage, you get out of engagement with an opponent. You can choose to win this automatically. Before rolling by taking an opportunity attack. All right, so it gives them an option to actually disengage no matter what they're doing, moving. They can't get to a lever. Let's say they want to get to a lever or a door. Same thing with Flea, right? You can choose to automatically succeed before rolling if you take by taking an opportunity attack. By taking an opportunity. All right. All right. So I don't really need to do anything normal, anything different here. Stopping movement. Why did I put that in there? There's another feat. Was it Guardian? Feats. Guardian. No, what is it? There's a Sentinel feat and one Polearm Master, I think it is. That's the one. You keep enemies at bay with reach weapons. That's right. You can take to attack action and attack. When you're wielding a glaive, halberd, pike, quarterstaff, or spear, other creatures provoke an attack of opportunity from you when they enter your reach. So that is a problem when you go Theater of the Mind, because there's a big advantage with a battle map. Characters are moving past other characters. Reach makes a big deal. So you can engage any number of opponents, by the way. What does that do? Oh, I know what else to do. Actually, winning doesn't mean. What does winning mean? It's engagement that gives you -2 to your attack roll. Failing. Winning means you attack anyone you have engaged freely. Losing means you have -1 to attack rolls, not +1 to their AC universally against that opponent. Winning just means you impose a -2. I should put this down here. Yeah, it's going to come out redundant if I don't. Winning means you have +2 to your AC against any opponent you successfully avoided. All right. Disengage. You can only do that if you're already engaged, obviously. You get out of by winning, you no longer engaged by that opponent and cannot be attacked by them, because you may not be able to disengage everybody. So it's only if you successfully disengage from everybody that you can flee, that you can truly go do something without worrying about it. Or you just take your attacks of opportunity and just go with it, man. Just take your lumps. Flee, same thing, getting out of cover. Using cover, if you maintain your cover. All right, flanking, we already said what that is. Intercept, we've already said what that is. Yeah, that's yeah. Anybody has any comments on this? If you think you'd use it, I think I need I've run it in 4 sessions now, 4 different campaigns. And like I said at the top of the stream, I ran this without telling the players that I was actually using these rules. I didn't give them a primer. I didn't put anything, oh, I have this new set of rules. This is what you need to learn. I didn't do any of that. I just had these sort of loosely in my mind and how I would do things. And the complexity, it wasn't that complex, really. Players just said, okay, can I go attack so-and-so? Most of the time, the answer was, yeah, they want to bring it on. They want you to attack them. So they'll keep going at it. In a couple cases, they would go, I want to get around and attack the priest. And I would say, well, the person by the wagon, the big knight, is trying to keep you from doing that. So you're going to have to beat them in an engage, like an opposed athletics check. If you fail, you're going to have to fight the knight. If you succeed, you'll get around him and get to the priest. It was really that easy. It flowed very naturally. It made people get creative about, like, I remember I had one person in that wagon fight I talked about earlier. They said, well, I want to use acrobatics to roll under the wagon and crawl so I don't have to worry about it. And I thought, ooh, that was super awesome. So I gave them advantage on the attack against, on the roll against the knight to get past the knight, and I let them use only their first dice rolled as against the priest who wanted to avoid them. So this is not replacing tactical combat. This is meant to lean in to the fuzzy nature of theater of the mind, to cause people to sort of try to get more by being descriptive about their actions, by trying to engage their skills, and all those other kinds of things. So it's not intended to be like a tactical game. It's not intended to be procedural in that way. And I think leaning into that with theater of the mind is really a strength of theater of the mind. So yeah, that's what we're doing. That's what this is intended to do. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I think I've got this. I need to refine these because there's a lot of questions. I might make this a blog post pretty soon, but I want a few things. Let me get back to that. I want, like, you're at disadvantage if you've already done something. Like if you've already avoided somebody, trying to engage somebody else is a little hard if you're trying to avoid somebody. If you've already engaged somebody, trying to avoid somebody is hard because you're already kind of rooted to get into a fight with somebody. That is what I'm trying to establish here. I think I've said that. If you're previously engaged or avoided someone, you're disadvantaged on your maneuver roll, on any maneuver roll. You can engage multiple opponents. You have to call for it. I don't know where I would put that. These abilities can be used on any number of opponents at once. So like the paladin who rushes into combat, you're fighting 5 orcs, and the paladin just throws down and says, I want to engage every one of them. And he just runs in the middle of them. They all roll. He figures, okay, you've got 3 engaged, a couple they're out of your reach, you don't worry about it. And you just roll forward from there. Now the advantage is that paladin can't get out of trouble very quickly. He's really kind of disrupted the orcs, and now they're having a hard time getting around them if they want to attack the wizard or something like that. It all really makes a big difference in sort of how the dynamic nature of combat flows. And again, it's not meant to be gamist, right? It's meant to just be kind of loose and fancy. I have I usually couple other rules. I have this thing called thrilling heroics in games, where if people try other maneuvers, getting up on a rock ledge to get height, can they get an advantage on their ranged weapon attack, or can they get advantage on their maneuver rolls? Those are all in the game. Those are all within it. There's a couple of things that this does not account for that I'm not quite sure what to do about. The one that comes to mind primarily is moving by somebody, which is really something that happens when you do a flyby attack from a flying mount or a riding mount, right? How does that work? I don't quite know how to handle it. So I might need to pull like a special note charging, right? Charging or move by. I'll call move by actions. This happens. An opponent. Well, not this happens. We know that, right? You attempt to move past an opponent, move up to an opponent. Actually, let's say you attempt to engage an opponent to make an attack, then move away to safety. You must have appropriate movement to do this. If you win, you successfully move past someone. Do they get a reaction to attack you, though? You successfully attack and move away. If you fail, you have to give the player the choice. You have the choice of taking an attack, an opportunity attack, hey, how are you? Fatty Catty, how are you? I'm trying to think through this charge action. Hey, Roblox Gamer, how you doing? Let's see. So if they move up, they make a choice. They move past. They move up, make an attack, move away, like a charging horse, a knight with a lance. If they win, they successfully move away. If they fail, they have the choice of taking the attack of opportunity against them, or remaining engaged with the opponent, or remaining. I'm writing about chili. No. Let's see. Then there's this whole thing of reach weapons, right? There's an option of maybe there's a keep someone at a distance, right? Keep someone at range. So range weapons or reach weapons. Really, the advantage here is if you haven't successfully engaged, if you normally take a -1 for like someone who's tried to avoid you, opponents who try to avoid you, you do not have, that's it, you do not have -2 to your attack against opponents who successfully avoided you. To your attack against who successfully avoid you. Yeah, that works. That works for me. So on a tactical battle map, the advantage of a reach weapon is you're able to attack them when they're not able to attack you. But that, honestly, that is an extremely rare case, right? They're unable to. I mean, it's a very rare case where someone's stuck at that 5 feet away from you and not able to close if they want to. So I don't think we're really losing anything by doing that. And reach weapons, I should say reach, not just weapons. Like it could be physical reach, right? You do not have -1 attack opponents who are successfully avoided you. Special notes. Yeah, I think that works. I mean, I think that. So I can't think of anything Are you analyzing about Rolly Jefferson? I have no idea what you're talking about, Roblox gamer. Um, Not sure who that is. Yeah, so I think I've covered. I can't think of an element of combat that I'm invalidating. I can't think of a way that there's this idea of someone within 5 feet of somebody else. That's really just comes out on who's engaged who, right? You just consider them engaged. If you want to engage somebody, you just engage them. You can engage multiple opponents. I could do something like reach, which is like melee reach, uh, like melee reach or long range, right? That could be. I think that's overkill, though. I don't want to get into tracking that. I was just thinking through that in that way of like, could I just say that that something like people. Well, I'm trying to crystallize my own thought here. Do I say something like people are have to have different capabilities when they're in certain ranges? Burning Wheel did that. I actually find that kind of a nightmare to try to keep track of. I just felt like it was just too much, and I never could write it down. It's hard enough keeping track of like who's successfully engaged who that I don't want to do that. Yeah, so I think that's probably it for me. I think that this works well enough that I wouldn't want to that I could probably use this in my game. This is what I've used before. This refines a little bit of my thinking. I think I'm going to get to the point where I want to do a small blog post on this, talk about how people can move it, use it in their games. If you think you would use it, go ahead and let me know. If you think you wouldn't, say why. That'd be fine too. But yeah, I've gotten some out of this, and I hope you would too. So I'm going to leave it here actually for tonight. I think that's about it. All right, we're cutting in just under an hour, but that's about an hour. It's been long enough. I appreciate it. I hope you've gotten something out of tonight's stream. I'll do a stream soon on sort of races and doing. I'm going to do a world design and sort of racial designs and how to design their cultures in the world. I'll do a live stream about that. I'm going to do a live stream soon about ritual magic, which is a system I'm coming up for my game setting as well. That'll provide like much more like strategic magic options for the map. I've really missed this idea of utility spells in 5th edition and 4th edition. They really got rid of them. I love utility spells from previous editions, and I think rituals are a way to get back to that. So I'll do that in the future. Well, anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. If you're seeing it later, go ahead and leave a like, subscribe, comment down on the tavern wall. I hope you'll consider doing all those things. I hope you'll consider following me on Twitter. I am Optional Rule on Twitter. I am Optional Rule here on Twitch. You can also find me under Optional Rule on YouTube, but I'm not big enough to have my name channel, so you can find me if you just type in Optional Rule. All right, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you got something out of tonight's stream. I hope you'll engage, drop a comment, all those kind of things. Thank you. Remember, until next time, fun is not optional. All right, thanks, everybody.
I feel